Hi, evolutionaries. Welcome to episode 13 of Evolution Greenworks. Your host, Lorena Mitchell. I have a very special guest for you today. His name is Jim Nostedt, and he's with Cfar Value. One of the things he can do for us is understanding those changes we're making to new buildings to make them more energy or high performance buildings. And he can lay it on the line for you. So, welcome, Jim.
Good morning, Lorena.
Hi, good morning. So nice to see you this morning. We actually air at Wednesdays at 8 p.m., so people will be viewing you in the evening.
Good
But
evening as
it
well.
is a bright, sunny morning here right now while we're talking. So, Jim, can you tell me a little bit about Cfar?
Well, Cfar is quite a different tool. I don't know of anyone else who is doing what we do, but Cfar is a way to look at the life cycle cost of a building, or what we call the total cost of building ownership. And what we see from that is that um, high performance buildings, energy efficient buildings, are much have a much lower total cost of building ownership in the long term than regular code built buildings or your existing building for that matter.
Well, that's really interesting. I understand you have a presentation today, so I'm going to actually bring on the screen share here. Um, Jim is going to be talking a lot about the cost of a building over time as well. So I think it's really important for people to understand from the perspective of everything is, you just look at it like a deer in the headlights when you're looking at this information when you're trying to design a new home or a new building, and you're trying to figure out you know what those implications will have on your high performance building, and you're trying to do this. So this is where Jim comes in. He's the one who can take all of that voodoo out of it, and he can make everything make sense, dollars and cents, in fact. Okay, Jim.
Sure. So I'm going to go through this information, and I think once you start to see it, you'll see that this is really not that complicated, but it is going to show you that something that other people really aren't doing. And so really what we're going to show you is that new high performance net zero buildings will save you 30 to 40% over a comparative code built building when you look at the life cycle cost, or what we call the total cost of building ownership. And you can also do this with existing buildings and deep retrofits, and the savings are very similar, although it takes a little longer for those savings to show. And I'm going to show you sort of how that's put together in a minute. But what is a Cfar valuation? Well, it's really a life cycle cost analysis, or what we call the total cost of building ownership over the useful life of the building. Typically, that's 60 years. Now, the building will last longer than 60 years, but at 60 years, there's typically a major retrofit done, or a repurposing of that building.
Jim, actually, can I interject there? And I
Sure.
think this is something I know. I own Evolve Green, so we do solar systems, and we generally do our costing over 32 years because it's the average life cycle for an inverter system, not a solar panel system, not the solar panels themselves, but the inverters that send the energy in, right? So I think one of the things that people don't understand here is this would be the average cost, and you said this is over the period before a big remodeling would have to happen. Is that what you mean? Or
Yes, typically, I mean, there's lots of buildings around that are over 100 years old, but over that period, um, there's renovations done to those buildings, or a major refit. Maybe the building has changed purpose. Maybe it was an office building and now it's a warehouse, or vice versa.
right.
Or
Yeah, that
maybe it
makes
was
sense.
a single family home and now it's a duplex. So all those things happen over the course of the life of the building. But 60 years is kind of enough time for us to evaluate, because as you mentioned, each building component or system has a different life cycle. And so
Yeah.
you need to account for several of those life cycles, or otherwise you miss some of the major costs.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. All right. So Jim is going to continue with the presentation.
Okay. So really what we're doing is we're doing a whole building analysis as opposed to just one component. And we're going to include utilities and carbon tax. Carbon tax is a new one and it's getting bigger. Age-related component maintenance and renewal. That means the roof, the asphalt shingles are going to wear out or age out, and they'll have to be replaced. And you have to have money in the bank to pay for that when it happens. It also includes mortgage interest, insurance, property tax. And this is one that we've added recently because there's a big push to change fossil fuel burning systems to renewable energy of some kind. And somewhere along the line, before 2050, you're going to have to pay for that change. So if you have a natural gas heating system, you're going to have to change that to, at least in Manitoba, something that's electric and renewable. So I want to also talk about, most often when people talk about buildings, they just talk about the energy component. And energy is a really important part, but there's some other things. So sustainability is more than just energy. It also includes all the other building performance attributes, and you need to account for all those. And that's energy efficiency we talked about, but greenhouse gas reduction, embodied carbon is something's new. There's carbon in every, or carbon is used in any building component that's made, but wood is actually, for example, carbon was absorbed when that tree was growing, and then it's stored in the building when you build it. And the same thing would happen with, for example, cellulose insulation. But concrete, for example, there was carbon expended when the cement was produced in the kiln. So you need to start accounting for that carbon.
Great. I have a question about that too. The GHG, a lot of people don't actually understand GHG that well. I was wondering if you could touch on that just a little bit more.
Sure. So GHG stands for greenhouse gas emissions, and those emissions result from burning of fossil fuels. And so many of us have natural gas heating systems in our home, and the greenhouse gas goes up the chimney every day. And in fact, that greenhouse gas accumulates in the environment and is there forever. It takes years and years and years to get rid of it out of the atmosphere. And so if you don't put it in, then you don't continue to add to it. Is that good?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think too, like with the whole carbon tax thing coming down, and I think it's a lot of mystery behind how are people going to get around that too. I believe that with high performance buildings, lowering our GHG, creating that reduction, I think on our buildings, creating even better heating systems within that are lower GHG, I think that people are going to achieve carbon tax relief over that as well, right?
Yes. So, I mean, there's two ways to look at reducing the amount of carbon. One is, or the amount of GHG emissions is, first of all, don't burn it in the first place,
Right.
which means re-insulating the building and making it more airtight and having better windows. And then the second one is to generate through some renewable form of energy like solar panels. And so all of those things help you reduce your greenhouse gas emissions.
Excellent.
So the next thing that's on the list is durability, and all of you know that different products have different lifespans. In other words, if they're more durable and they last longer, then often they cost you less in the long term. Now that's not true for everything, but I think intuitively we know that when we buy a good product, it will last a long time. And for example, what's the durability comparison between asphalt shingles versus metal roofing? And the metal roofing costs more upfront, but it lasts longer.
But
So
there's a misnomer on metal roofing, though. When you think about it, too, I mean, the screw heads have these little bushings in them, and those need to be replaced over time. Otherwise, you could develop leaks in your metal roof. So the metal roof itself lasts longer, but it does require some maintenance. So that has to be taken into account too, right?
correct. So I recently looked at a building that has a very big metal roof, and there's something like 8,000 screws that need to be replaced. Okay, big
Wow,
cost. However, there are metal roofs that have no exposed metal fasteners, and
really?
they are some call them standing seam. There's snap lock. There's different trade names for this, but um, if that metal roof doesn't have an exposed fastener, it's not the fastener itself,
Right.
it's the rubber washer that's behind the fastener that's the problem. And the rubber washers have got better, but why not eliminate that rubber washer altogether and use a roofing system that,
That's
uh,
interesting. So you can get a metal roof with these standing seams that click together so they don't require exposed fasteners. So that's one whole maintenance step you can take out, which is amazing.
yes, and it's a really important one. Now, obviously, that metal roof costs a bit more than the other, and if you just look at first cost, then you make a bad decision.
Right?
And so
That's where
that's
you come in though, right? You can tell them these things.
yes, well, I can't tell them everything, but I try. But we can evaluate those things. That's really what we're in the
Right.
process of doing, is making people think about these things and then showing them a way of how to evaluate
Right. But if
that
you can
technology.
address the durability from one type of thing to another type of thing and show them the costing over the 60 years, then they start to really get it, don't they?
Exactly. And people don't think that way. It's not normal to think that way. And I'm talking about not only homeowners, but also talking about building designers and professionals. But if you talk to a lot of home builders, and what they'll say is, it's all about first cost, and let me get into that house. That's really all I want to do. But then they get hit with a very high energy bill, and all of a sudden their low first cost house is not as good as they thought it is.
And to be fair, I've gotten these calls where all of a sudden, a couple of months in, a customer moves into their brand new home, and all of a sudden their energy costs are through the roof. And they said, "I thought we were getting a brand new house, which means it should do well energy wise." And so they thought they would get a high energy efficient home, and that's just not the case.
And there's a lot of work in getting a high performance home, and there's not a huge number of people doing it at this point in time. It's improving, and I would say just in the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of turnaround in that people are now saying, "Oh, we need to think differently than what we did before." And carbon tax helps, but people are also saying we need to change, reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate climate change. So those are things that are people are the message is getting through. It's been slow, but and
Agreed.
this helps.
Agreed. I've noticed over even the past 5 years that people, general population, are understanding better what these different things mean for them, and they're asking better questions, which is important,
Right.
right? So they may not be making better decisions yet, but it starts with the education.
And I guess the majority of my time is spent in education, doing what we're doing today.
Knowledge is power. It always
Exactly.
has been.
So we talked about durability, um, but we also need to talk about maintenance and renewal costs, because those are a big deal. How often are you going to have to
Agreed.
replace that hot water tank, or the metal roofing, or the asphalt shingles, or whatever it is? And people forget about those things. And
Yes.
then really that relates to this life cycle performance, making things last longer, and lowering those costs. And then one of the things that is, I guess, not thought about when these high performance homes is your occupant comfort and productivity is much better. There's no cold drafts. You're always comfortable. The temperature is always uniform, and you're not baking one minute and freezing the next.
And
And
that's
that
important
improves.
too.
Yeah, it's really important. And particularly in commercial buildings, it's even more important.
Oh yeah, on a large scale.
So what is the whole objective of the Cfar valuation? Well, first of all, it's to optimize the whole building investment, okay, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the total cost of building ownership. And we can show that these high performance buildings have much higher value than code built. And we can show that you can do a deep retrofit. You can achieve net zero with much higher value over the existing building, over its remaining useful life. And many times in these retrofits, you've totally renewed that building and given it a total new life.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think people also misunderstand net zero sometimes too, because it can be achieved many ways. They think they can throw like solar at it, and that's one way to do it. But really, the cheapest way to go about this is build it right from the
Correct.
beginning.
And that's what this is all about, is building it right from the beginning.
Renewables work best together, but they work best together with the right foundation. And the foundation is your insulation, your high performance windows, your building envelope. I mean, there's really just so many pieces to this, isn't there?
There is. And it's not that difficult, but you really have to take care of all the details. And I think taking care of the details is what makes it work.
Well, and I think too, like I interviewed Evan Provin and from the co-op there from Sun Certified, and he was, taking us through one of the buildings, a house actually that you had worked on with them, and it was truly amazing how little energy this house will take to run over a course of time. It's quite amazing the savings that these new homeowners will have over the 60-year period. And there's a value now. When we bring someone like your company with Cfar, we're able to assert a value, especially once we have Prairie House with Geo Robson. What he does is he goes in and he will attach certification value to your home as well. So there's a resale value to this as well, not just your own savings.
Right. And I'm going to show you an example of one of the homes that Sun Certified Builders has done, because they're one of the top builders in Manitoba in terms of building passive homes or high performance homes. And
Absolutely.
I'll show you the result of their hard work.
Excellent.
So what do we get out of this when we do this, and what is the benefit to the owner? And there's a big saving over the useful life of the building. Um, and I'll show you what those savings are in a minute. But what people don't understand is that 90% of the cost of ownership occurs after the construction is complete. So if you have $1 million building today, it's going to cost you $10 million to own and operate. Or if it's a $500,000 home, then it's 5 million, about a factor of 10. And then, and so if you can just save 20% of that $10 million, that's $2 million or $33,000 per year over that 60-year life. That's a lot of money. And what does that do? It protects you from future utility rate increases, rising carbon tax, and it's reduced your energy and water consumption. And you have a higher asset value with that home or building that outperforms code-built buildings. So how can the Cfar valuation help owners and investors? Well, first of all, to understand what your costs are for all those things, because most people don't. I always ask the designers that I talk to is, when you're building a new building, has anyone ever asked you what it costs to own and operate these buildings? And I'm starting to get a few hands that get raised now and say, yeah, somebody asked me about that, but it's few and far between. And so what we're doing is we're going to try and reduce this total cost of building ownership. And the next thing is that we can also provide the appraisers with a monetized value of that high performance building. I'm going to talk more about that in a second, because if
Yeah,
you
you know,
per
this is the one thing I have difficulty, and I've dealt with a lot of appraisers. They don't know how to cost evaluate a solar system at all. They just ask you, well, how much did you spend on it?
Mhm.
And it's like they start devaluating it the second it's on the home when it has like 10 to 25-year warranties and all of these things for direct replacement. So this system is going to have an average cycle of 32 years in the market, where the panels could last even 50 years, but yet they give very little evaluation to this. And without the appraisers on board, you know, the resale prospects are tough. So if you've managed a way to provide the appraisers with the monetized value of doing high performance, this would definitely make a huge impact for homeowners. I just wanted to break for a quick commercial break here. And then I'm from our sponsors, Evolve Green. And as soon as we come back, I wanted to talk to you more, Jim, about that evaluation.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent.
Why go solar? It's not just for the environment, although that is a great reason. Did you know that when you install your new solar plant, you are only paying 7 cents per kilowatt? That's right, 7 cents! Solar is now cheaper than buying electricity, 25% cheaper than buying it from Manitoba Hydro. Going solar is different from any other investment you will make in your life, as you will retain the value on your roof. Solar does not depreciate like other investments do, and unlike a GIC, your investment will start paying you from day one. And when you choose to sell your home, well, you will get the cost of the solar back, as this investment rarely depreciates. When choosing solar, look for high-end products like microinverters with 10 to 25-year warranties. Make sure your installation is done by a professional. We are Evolve Green, and we are celebrating 12 years in the industry and can help you put your roof to work for you. Ask also about your options like battery backup for when the grid fails, and how about solar heaters to get rid of snow buildup. Are you a farm or a business? Did you know that your solar is a 100% tax write-off? Yes, that's right. You can write off all the cost for the solar in the year you purchased it. This is a perfect investment for any business. In Manitoba, the portion a resident customer sells to Hydro is also a tax write-off in the first year. Farms pay no PST on solar systems. We build, design, and supply the best in solar power for both on and off the grid. For experts you can trust, call or email Evolve Green today. 1-866-5-EVOLVE or support@evolvegreen.ca. Why go solar?
Welcome back, evolutionaries. We're having a wonderful chat here today with Jim Nostedt from Cfar Value. And, you know, I really like the name because he told me that they came up with it because what they're trying to do is get you to see into the future, right? So Cfar. Welcome back, Jim. And I love you're talking about, you know, so many incredible things here, and we're now talking about the actual life cycle and also the resale value that we're talking about here, right? So what is the evaluation?
So I have a slide that I'm gonna cover in a minute with this, with the monetizing the value of this high performance home. But so I'll maybe save that for 1 minute till we get to that slide,
Sounds
because there's a
good.
few other points in there. But it is a really important aspect of this whole business. So if you own a building and you're actually renting it, then your lower total cost of building ownership can also mean higher profit and lower rent, depending on which way you as the owner would like to go. So I think I want to talk about the high performance building game, because I think there's no losers in this game. The owner wins because he has a lower total cost of building ownership and a building that's more resilient to climate change. The design team wins because their design fees are higher, particularly on commercial buildings, not so much on residential. But it's more satisfying work for a designer to build a high performance building than it is to build the same thing they just did yesterday.
Oh, I know. I totally enjoy it too.
And then the contractor wins because the building has a higher capital cost, so their profit should be a little higher. And the bank wins because they've loaned more money, but because the operating and maintenance costs are lower, there's less owner defaults and less risk for the bank. So they like this. And then the occupant or renter wins because their costs are lower and the building is more comfortable with better indoor air quality. So, and certainly the planet wins at the end of the day because there's less greenhouse gas emissions. But I want to get into a case study, I guess, of a new building. And this one was done by Sun Certified Builders. Evan Proven was on, or Donald, I don't remember which one you said, but two cousins that own this company, Sun Certified Builders. And this is an example of a high performance home, and they typically cost more to build. And that cost is coming down as the builders get more experienced, but there's a saving of 30 to 40% on the total cost of building ownership. And a 1,200 square foot building, $310,000. And when people ask me about high performance homes, and I can remember taking my wife to see a project, and it had red metal roofing. She said, well, I would never like a high performance building because I don't want a red roof. And I'm not making fun of her, but that's a common comment, is
Yes.
that there is no, the building can look like whatever you want it to make it look like, but the important part is how it's built. And
Yes.
so don't take the appearance of the building is not what drives a high performance building.
Right.
So here's an example of this is the code built. This is a comparison between a code built building and a high performance building. And you can see the greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced from 247,000 kilograms over 60 years to zero. And then the energy consumption has been reduced almost to net zero. Very slight amount there. And you could adjust that a little bit with an extra solar panel or something. But then if you look at the total cost of building ownership, you've saved $336,000 over its life, which is a 35% savings. Now, the total cost of building ownership at 12 years in this case is still $14,000. It is not as big as it is later on because the savings are accumulating, but they also accelerate over time because there's energy inflation, there's cost inflation for building materials, all those kind of
And
things.
let's go back to that for just a second too. Let's talk about that inflation value, because the cost of energy has been going up anywhere from 6 to 8% a year. Once you've put in that solar system, I'm just going to use that as an example. The solar system you're not paying for it again and again and again, but it is saving you every single year. The cost savings evaluation, though, is going up every year. It's fortified your energy. Fortifying your energy is a big deal these days.
Yes, and that's a really good point. In fact, what I didn't mention is this high performance home does have solar panels on it. It's not a huge array because the load is very small, but the hydroelectricity costs in Manitoba have gone up 4.2% on average over the last 37 years. Now, it's been up and down, and it isn't always going up at 2 or 4%.
Right.
But on the long-term average is 4.2%. So the energy that you bought today is 8 cents a kilowatt hour, but next year it's 8 cents plus 4.2%.
Yeah, we're actually closer to 10 cents with the taxes too, depending on the type of heating source you've chosen, because there's more tax on gas heat, for instance.
Correct. So over time, that energy cost is going up. But also remember that the cost of the heating system that you chose, or the hot water tank, the hot water tank's $1,000 this year. When you need to replace it in 10 years, it's $1,000 plus 2% over that 10 years. So it's a big deal. And those costs continue to escalate. So if you've chosen durable materials and you have to replace, and you have a hot water tank that has a lifetime warranty, then you don't worry about that cost because you paid a little more upfront for it, but it'll never occur again.
Right.
And the same thing with solar panels. The solar panels have a long life, so you won't replace those very often in 60 years, and maybe never. And maybe you talk about the inverter, maybe only replacing part of it. So,
Exactly.
but even, I can't remember in this specific example, but, and I'm going to use the numbers that you've talked about here for the life of the inverter and the life of the solar panels, because there isn't a lot of experience with that yet. But even replacing the solar panels over in every 25 years, you're still money ahead. Okay.
Yes.
So solar panels have become, since we were doing this analysis, my opinion of solar panels has came 180 degrees, because we always used to say, do the energy performance or the energy saving measures first, and then add the solar. And I think that still applies, but the solar is much, much better than it used to be.
Yes.
Costs have come down, but when you analyze it over a long period of time, then it's really a good deal.
Absolutely.
So this is a local builder built right here in Winnipeg, and so your savings are pretty substantial.
I actually was able to go into this building while they were creating it, and they were showing me how they were doing the wall structures. It was incredible how they were taking away the cold bridging in the walls, so it's I can't remember, I think it was like a 1 foot wall, but how they were doing that cold bridging and getting the extra R value for the insulation in there was just
Correct.
truly incredible.
Yeah, these are the things: getting rid of thermal bridges, high amounts of insulation, air tightness, good quality windows, and then a good quality ventilation system to provide outdoor air. I'm going to give you another example. This is a big example of a multi-use building in Ontario, commercial building. This one costs an additional 2% more to build, but it's a $60 million building, but it has a 25% lower total cost of building ownership. This is incredible. And it has a 42% lower total cost of building ownership with the solar panels. So I'll just give you some quick numbers on this. So the building was 60 million. This was designed initially as a code-built building, and then they did a couple of potential options and evaluated to make the building, get rid of the thermal bridges, add more insulation. But if you look at the total cost of building ownership, and we added the solar panels on as well. And if you look at the total cost of building ownership, you'll see across that the savings are $45 million without solar panels and $73 million with solar panels. So the percentage savings are 25 to 42%, depending on which option you choose. And a lot of people can't grasp those bigger numbers, but let's boil that down to what does it cost you per year? And so if you took the $177 million for this code-built building to own it, operate it, that's divide by 60, divide by 12, that's $245,000 a month. Okay.
Wow.
It's huge.
It's huge. So, like, getting the building is only the first start. What they don't always take into consideration is this amount that it's going to cost to run this thing.
Yeah, and it's big numbers, and
It is.
And that's the important piece in this is it's important to look at the capital cost, but it's far more important to look at what it's going
But
to
when you're
cost to
looking
own
at
and
the
operate.
capital costs, these are generally, this is where the mortgage and the financing and all of this stuff is going to happen. But these ongoing costs have to come out of your coffer, right?
Exactly.
So I'm looking at the difference here between the stick built, like the regular code built facility, versus the solar panel one, and we're less than half. This is
Correct.
amazing.
Yeah, it's it's big numbers. And in this case, this building was being built for low income people. And so if you can reduce the rent and keep it low, that makes
Yeah.
their life more, I guess, makes their life easier because their costs are lower.
And you've created a better building too. Like they're going to be more comfortable. They're going to be, want to stay. And, I think it just overall, the whole picture and the less cost is just going to promote success for these people as well.
Absolutely. So I think I'm gonna give you one more example. Oh, this is a different way to look at that same project, but you see the red line at the
Yeah.
top is the cumulative total cost of building ownership over the 60 years. And you can see you add up the energy costs every year and you add on the maintenance
Wow.
costs. And you can see it's almost $180 million at the end of 60 years. And then the other B, C, and D are the options that we investigated. And so B and C are very similar. The lines are pretty much on top of each other. And then option D is with the solar panels. But notice that those lines start out one on top of the other. So right from day one, there's almost no difference in the cost
Right.
to own and operate this building. So um, and so you can kind of judge how good you've done in your design and whatever for where these lines start to cross. In this case, the lines are pretty much crossing right at the very beginning. And so people will often talk about in energy things like simple payback and these kind of things. Those are not good measures of how these costs are, or how these I guess how these costs are evaluated, because simple payback really only deals with a very short time period, and then they're not evaluating how often that those building components need replacing.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. There is a complex amount of things to think about with this. And that's why I believe, your company is amazing, offering people kind of a way out to understand better these situations. And, they're faced with building their new building, whether it be, an RM putting up a new building or anything really,
Mhm.
building a new apartment block, a residential house. Your service can help because you take all of that voodoo out and you actually say, hey, this is your code built. This is your next step. This is your next step. And you make it in real terms so that their financiers can understand it, so the evaluators can understand it better, and they can make more informed decisions. And that's really what it's about.
So I'm going to move on to an existing building, and we're going to pick up the pace a little bit because I think we're running out of time a little bit. But um, existing buildings are the big problem. And so how do we go about evaluating these? And we do it pretty much in the same way. This is a small apartment building in Halifax that's going to undergo a deep retrofit. So this is adding a lot of exterior insulation, changing the mechanical systems, better windows, all those kind of things. And in this case, we evaluated a bunch of options. I'm just going to show you two, but it was an existing building, and then we did a deep retrofit with mini split heat pumps and electric boiler for backup, but also solar panels. And so the greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced over 100%. And then the energy consumption has essentially gone to zero. And then if you look at the total cost of building ownership at 60 years, you've saved $1.5 million or 37%. Now, I wanted to come back here and show you in this case, because this is a retrofit, the total cost of building ownership at 12 years is minus $200,000. So it looks like in the beginning, this is a bad deal. But by the time year 25 comes along, you're pretty much breaking even, but you still saved $1.5 million or 37% in the remaining years. So you have to think a little bit longer term and in retrofit, but these savings are still pretty substantial. And in this case, the savings are $39,000 per year on average, which is like $2,000 a month. So I want to show you very quickly where these on this existing building where the costs come from, and you can see on this graph the big green bar on the bottom on the left for the existing building is the energy cost, and it's a big deal. Also, the purple bar above that is the maintenance and renewal costs, and then property taxes, light blue, and then home insurance on the top. In this case, there's very little interest because of the way this project was financed, but also interest rates are very, very low. But on this bar, there on the new deep retrofit, there's actually zero cost for energy. I mean, there is a tiny, tiny cost on the bottom, but it's essentially zero. And so you see, you've saved 37% in this case. So I want to move on fairly quickly here, but in this deep retrofit situation, the solar panels and the deep retrofit have reduced your total cost of building ownership by $1.5 million. But the order of optimization is important, and this goes for both new and existing buildings, but you need to reduce the load and improve the durability of the materials first. Reducing the load means a high performance building with lots of insulation, air tightness, good windows, etc. Electrifying means switching from fossil fuels to electricity, and often ground source heat pumps are a great way to go. And because they operate at a constant temperature year round, they have a much higher efficiency. And that's also going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And then you add the solar to get you to net zero. And then you want to do this evaluation at the beginning of the project, because that's when you optimize. When you optimize on paper, you don't optimize when the building is built, you optimize afterwards. And then there's no point in adding extra insulation, and add a little bit of insulation now, and you've seen this happen. Somebody tears off the siding on their house to put on new siding, and they put on an inch of foam, and then they put back on new siding. Well, are you gonna, when you have to make your home net zero, are you gonna come back, take that siding off, and add more insulation later? Doesn't make sense at all. You go all the way to high performance the first time, make that wall so that that building could be essentially net zero. So, and in these cases, these buildings are completely renewed. They have a whole new 60-year life.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I think I'm going to hit your point now about getting the value out of your high performance building, because every building that's applying for a commercial mortgage must get appraised, and most appraisals are based on a comparative analysis, and that means your house next door compared to mine. If they have, let's say your house is a little bit bigger in square footage, but I'm going to sell mine, so all they do is they say, oh, yours is 1,500 square feet, mine's 1,000 square feet, so with that extra, we'll just ratio that value down, and that's what we're going to show for the value of that home. But that's not, your house may have on a lot of solar panels, for example, which is going to reduce your operating cost. It may be a high performance house that uses very little energy. So that's not a good analysis. And so in the United States, they have a green building appraisal guide, and it's like kind of a check sheet that's about, I don't know, 10 pages long. But what they don't do is monetize the value difference. So I gave that example. Your house next door has 100 solar panels on, and I got one solar panel. On the green building appraisal guide, we both get to tick the box that says I got solar panels, but your solar panels are producing most of your energy, and mine is doing almost nothing. So should they have the same value? No, they shouldn't. And so what we do is we look at the value of those, all those attributes of your home, both the energy ones and the ones that relate to durability. And then we provide the real value of those in an appraiser's report. And the appraiser takes that and does his evaluation based on that information. Now, there aren't a lot of appraisers that are doing this kind of stuff. In Manitoba, the only one I know is Preston Hartwick of Red River Appraisers. And but he's taken the time to understand this and then write articles in the appraisal magazines to show others. I don't think I'm going to go through the data used in the Cfar evaluation, but basically this is data that is being produced by the design team in most cases. So I think that's pretty much it, Lorena.
Well, that's wonderful. I want to thank you so much, Jim. You answer a lot of my questions before I even say them, but you do get to all of them, which is wonderful. I think that it's amazing that you're doing what you're doing. There's not enough people, I believe, doing this out in the market. It's such a gray area, and people need to understand that when you're taking on building anything, whether it be residential or a commercial building or a utility building, they really need to look at the cost of building over the course of time. This is huge, absolutely huge. And I think all the way through, we need to have the banks or the financiers, the appraisers, all of them need to have a better understanding. And I think what your service does, it really breaks it down, so that people have an understanding of what these different changes are going to accomplish in that time frame for the cost of building. So I want to thank you so much, Jim, for coming on today. It's been just amazing.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. You can tell I'm passionate about this, and I
Absolutely.
appreciate the opportunity to talk to other people about it.
Well, that's wonderful. And I'd love to have you on down the line and see what else you're doing in Manitoba down the road. But I know you work across Canada, so you're pretty busy guy. You're all over the place. Again, thanks for coming. Well, that's it for today's program, Evolutionaries. Next time on Evolution Greenworks, we're going to be investigating a little bit more on the climate side. So we'll see you next week with that, and just have a wonderful, beautiful, sunny day.